and had my conversations with the guys.
I went to the office to phone my wife because it was my first day back at work. When I got to my office, all of a sudden I hear a loud sound like air.
An explosion ripped through the living quarters and blew the walls down. And it seemed like immediately the blare of the sirens was going off.
I head out, I see an injured body there. He was deceased. I ran to the bridge. Everything is flashing red.
I didn't know I was going to die or not, but I did regret not spending more time with my wife and my children.
Once I got outside, that is the first time that I looked up and actually saw the ball of fire. It was just intense. It's the hottest fire I ever seen in my life. And that's when I feared for my life.
"41 miles off the coast of Louisiana, in the oil-rich Gulf of Mexico, sits the Deepwater Horizon Oil Rig. Owned by the company Transocean and commissioned by BP, she is the prize of the fleet. A state-of-the-art specialist drilling rig, her sole purpose to drill wells down to the deepest oil reserves in the world.
I had worked on the Deepwater Horizon for just about 10 years. It was quite a ship. It was actually a ship, not just a rig. I mean, it didn't have any anchors. It wasn't moored to the ground at all. It had these engines that kept it on location using GPS, and the engines motored back and forth to keep it in one spot the whole time. I always found that remarkable.
So we're on the helideck of the Deepwater Horizon. Get a 360-degree view here.
Life on a rig, it's kind of like, I don't know, being at summer camp, I guess. Well, maybe not as fun. I mean, you spend every day with the same guys, and you get to know them really well. And if you work on one particular rig for a long time, you get very close to them.
Back in April 2010, my job title was subsea supervisor. It's a unique life. Everybody that's out there, you treat them just like they're your family because you spend more time with them than your actual family.
The Horizon crew, they were really the best crew I've ever worked with.
The crew has been drilling since October. And the well has now reached the Macondo Reservoir, which contains $5 billion of oil and gas. It's 13,000 feet below the seabed, one of the deepest oil wells on record.
When you're drilling in deep water environments, there are new risks and the risks are higher.
BP were expanding and trying to get into deeper fields because that's where the pay was. And the government was not preventing them from going into these more dangerous fields. And they were pushing the boundaries and dealing with pressures, higher pressures as they went deeper.
Crucial to the safety of the rig is a substance known as mud. This heavy fluid is pumped into the well while it's being drilled.
My job on board was what's called a mud engineer. Mud is a term for drilling fluid. Its weight is what holds the oil and gas down. You have to have the right weight in order to hold that pressure trying to come up from blowing out.
Drilling the Macondo well has been tougher than expected and fraught with problems.
It got the reputation of being called the well from hell because it was just so difficult to get down. Sometimes we would take a kick, like the pressure was actually coming into the well. So yeah, it was a very difficult well to drill, and it kind of earned that name.
Delays have put the drilling behind schedule. By now, the Deepwater Horizon should have finished the well and made way for a separate rig designed to extract the oil.
The crew were getting pressure from BP to get the thing wrapped up. They were already basically $40 million plus over budget because they were 40 days late. Because every day they had to pay $1 million to Transocean to use their crew at that site. So they wanted to finish things up.
By late April, the well from hell is drilled.
So on the 20th, we had gotten to where we wanted to be, and BP was thrilled because Macondo was a rich well. They wanted to come right back and produce it.
To finish the well, the crew must make it safe by sealing it with a layer of cement. After which, mud engineers Leo Lindner and Gordon Jones can remove the drilling fluid and complete the job.
The morning of the 20th, got up like normal, and I met Gordon Jones at 4:30. Every day at 4:30, we would eat. Gordon Jones was my partner. Fantastic guy, just a wonderful guy. He was gonna have a baby. He and his wife were gonna have a baby. He had a little boy named Stafford who he was teaching to play golf. And little Max was on the way. Gordon told me that the cement job went really well.
On board the rig, the Transocean crew wants to perform a test. This will confirm the cement seal is secure. But it's time-consuming. BP wants to skip to the next step.
BP was receiving pressure from their bosses in Houston that it was time to get going. BP had a reputation for maybe underplaying safety more than some of the others in the industry.
When it came time to make a decision about how quickly to drill the well or how to go about doing the well, they took the riskier option.
The two sides agree to a series of quicker tests. These check for pressure changes that could indicate oil and gas is leaking past the cement seal. The first test is a success.
At that moment, I thought they had a good cement job. I thought the well was safe at this point.
3 more tests suggest there might be a leak.
And at that point, we didn't know what was going to happen.
The readings they were getting were confusing to them, and there was debate between the Transocean crew and the BP company man, who was the person in charge on the rig, about what all these readings meant.
The well is connected to the rig by a 5,000-foot-long pipe called the riser. Any leak below puts the Deepwater Horizon in danger of what engineers call a blowout.
If the well is leaking, that is definitely a big problem. Gas could get in the riser. Once gas get in the riser, gas expands as it's coming up, and when it hits surface, it's a monster.
Despite the concerning results, senior crew members decide to press on and complete the job. It's not a popular decision with everyone on board.
At 1,800 I come on tower, I go to the rig floor. I witnessed two Transocean supervisors having the discussion about the well. The Transocean supervisor, he was saying that something is going on with the well, that the well was flowing, that we need to close in and do some more tests. It got a little heated. The day Transocean supervisor walked off, immediately turned around and said, "Before you blow this place up, wake me up."
The Deepwater Horizon has been contracted by BP to drill one of the deepest oil wells on record. After several months, the 18,000-foot well is complete. The crew has sealed it with concrete to make it safe, ready to remove drilling mud from the pipe that connects the well to the rig. It's the final job for a project that has been beset with delays and rising costs.
It was taking a lot longer than they expected. They were getting pressure from BP, the owners of the well, who were paying $1 million a day or so to use the Transocean rig.
Once the drilling mud is removed, the well is ready to pump oil, and the millions lost to delays will become billions of dollars in profit. But separate safety checks disagree on whether the concrete seal is secure. And if it isn't, then the drilling mud is the only thing holding the oil and gas inside the well.
So there was this conflict between which result to accept, the one that said the well was secure or the one that said the well was not secure.
Engineer Leo Lindner has been waiting all day to find out if he has the go-ahead to pump out the drilling mud. By the end of his shift, no decision has been made.
I was staying up late, not leave it all on Gordon. And about 7:30, guy looks at me, slaps me on the back, says, "What the fuck are you still doing up, man? Go to sleep." I got this. And you know, I thought about it. I really didn't want to leave him in the lurch like that, but Gordon Jones was an excellent mud engineer, and I listened to his advice. And I go to sleep, and the man saved my life.
Around 8 p.m., Don Vidrine, who was the BP company man in charge of the well site, decided to go ahead and remove the drilling mud. This was really, really critical because once that's gone, there's really no additional barrier to the gas shooting up the riser pipe and causing an explosion.
I went to the office to phone my wife because it was my first day back at work. At this point, I didn't have any concerns. The well was secure.
And at some point, because the cement seal was in fact not as secure as they had thought, oil and gas started to enter the well from the reservoir at the bottom of the well.
Once the high pressure gas escaped, it just shot straight up the mile-long pipe through the Gulf of Mexico.
When I got to my office, all of a sudden I hear a loud sound like air.
It was like a 500-ton freight train coming up onto the drill floor.
An explosion ripped through the living quarters and blew the walls down. And it seems like immediately the blare of the sirens was going off. And I jumped out of bed and in my underwear.
one of the Transocean managers was at my door. He said, call the rig floor to see what's going on. I called the rig floor 3 times. I got no answer. So he went one way. I go up the stairways. I head out. When I get to the starboard side of the vessel, I see an injured body there. He was deceased. The chief mate met me there and he said, we need to get this guy. And I told him, I said, no. I said, we got to go. We had to leave him in order to save everybody else.
Chris is in a race against time to reach the controls for the blowout preventer. This is an emergency shut-off device that sits on the sea floor and is attached to the pipe carrying oil to the surface.
I'm in charge of the blowout preventer, which is the BOP. In the event of emergency, if oil and gas was gushing up the well, my job is to hit an emergency disconnect button that would secure the well and detach the rig from the well. I ran to the bridge. I went inside the bridge. I go to the BOP panel. Everything is flashing red lights. So that tells me that the panel is not working. Instantly I hit EDS. Nothing happened.
The EDS, the emergency disconnect system, didn't have any effect either. The fire on the rig had reached the stage where there was no longer contact between the rig and the blowout preventer on the seabed for that EDS system to work.
When the walls came off and I felt the force of that explosion, I did regret not spending more time with my wife and my children. I didn't know I was going to die or not, but I was hoping that if I did, that they would have good lives.
I went out the side door. Once I got outside, that is the first time that I looked up and actually saw the ball of fire that was coming from the rig floor. That ball of fire was so hot, it was just intense. It's the hottest fire I ever seen in my life. And that's when I feared for my life. I realized that we needed to get everybody off the rig as soon as possible.
Catastrophe has struck in the Gulf of Mexico. A huge explosion of oil and gas has ripped through the Deepwater Horizon, setting the drilling rig ablaze and putting its 126 crew members in mortal danger. As explosions reverberate into the night, 14 miles away, Bradley Shivers and 2 friends are fishing by another rig.
You're on camera.
We fished a lot of the oil platforms and rigs because of the lights and the structure attracted a lot of varieties of fish. While we were doing that, a light caught my eye in the distance, and so we picked up my binoculars on the boat and started looking in the distance, and it looked like there was a oil rig that was on fire, and we could actually hear the major explosions of the rig. You could hear it rumbling across the ocean, and the lights would flicker and got a lot brighter.
As the friends watch on, the boat radio crackles to life.
Shortly after that is when we started hearing the Mayday signs, Mayday calls on the radio from Deepwater Horizon, Mayday, Mayday.
The desperate cries for help have alerted the local Coast Guard.
You know, the Gulf is a really busy place. You know, there's 35,000 people on any given day working out there. It's not every day that we have an explosion of this magnitude. It's very rare. And so this was a significant incident. You don't know the status of the crew. You don't know the status of the rig itself.
I got it video.
We treat it as a serious search and rescue case.
As we were hearing the Mayday calls, we were also in contact with the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard asked us very nicely to please go help. And if you're a boat or a vessel and someone's in distress, you go help.
On board the stricken rig, the captain has ordered all crew to abandon ship.
So I put some clothes on, and we were told to go to the lifeboats. And it's not till then that I realized the rig was on fire.
Everybody else was in the lifeboats. Once I got inside the lifeboat, everybody was freaking out. You know, let's get away from the rig as fast as we can. It was chaotic in the boat because everybody was looking for their friends and, you know, trying to figure out who was missing.
Search and rescue choppers arrive, and the lifeboats head for the Damon Bankston. This huge workboat normally stores fluids and waste material from the Deepwater Horizon. But tonight, its cargo is the rig's desperate crew.
We were very fortunate that evening to have a Bankston nearby the rig, and they were able to courageously stay close to this exploding rig and assist them in getting away from the platform that was on fire.
I remember looking around the lifeboats and not seeing anyone from Gordon's crew, but thinking to myself, it's fine. They're going to be on the other lifeboat. Go down.
So once we get to the workboat and, you know, they take roll call to see who's missing and who's there.
It's really then we understood how many guys were missing. And it was a gut-wrenching moment.
There was a continued search for these 11 crew members that were unaccounted for. And that was really important to hold out hope that you might find somebody in the water.
Yeah, it's the boat. They're bringing them over back on board.
Fisherman Bradley and his friends have completed their 14-mile journey.
When we pulled up, people were still getting out of the water onto the Damon Bankston, and on the deck of the boat were yelling at us, hey, please go help, please search, there's people missing. So after we cast off to search for missing people, we pulled out and we would look for anything that could possibly look like a person. So we would pull in closer and closer to the rig because that's where most of the debris was. You could feel the heat and you could hear, you know, many explosions on the rig, and it was so hot. I do remember we saw a strobe light on, it looked like it was on the other side of the rig. We saw it flashing several times. So we started going towards it and then it just disappeared. Was that someone, was it just debris? Was it, you know, could it have been someone? I don't think so, but I've always wondered what happened, you know, with that light that we saw that night. You know, it was a horrific scene, honestly.
On land, news of the incident is starting to filter through to local journalists.
I'm a photographer for the Associated Press. I had just moved back to New Orleans, my hometown, 3 weeks prior. It was 4:30 in the morning when I got a wake-up call from my editor saying that a rig had exploded out in the Gulf and 11 men were missing. I knew this was going to be a major story. My news editor told me that the rig was leaning at 40 degrees, and I knew it was a race against time to get out there.
Gerald charters a helicopter to fly to the rig. 40 miles away, the scale of the disaster is becoming clear.
Daylight breaks, you can see the sheen on the water. You can tell it's very bad. And basically, we just stood by until word from town told us what to do.
When we finally get out there, we're leaning out of a helicopter with no doors on, 4,000 feet over nothing but blue water, and this orange ember of a rig on fire, and these 4 or 5 vessels around it in a futile attempt trying to put water on this thing that was raging out of control. And it was a very sobering feeling, because it's a very sad day when 11 men are missing. I knew that there was going to be a long search for these men. After we got back and landed and I filed my pictures, those images went global, and it was front page everywhere the next day, all over the world.
"8,000 miles away in Abu Dhabi, well-control specialist David Barnett is watching the disaster unfold on TV.
The initial pictures that I saw, it was catastrophic, the worst offshore fire I'd ever seen in my 40 years in oil and gas. To my knowledge, there had never been a situation like this in deep water.
David receives a call from BP's HQ in Houston. They urgently need him to assess whether oil is still escaping the well at the sea floor.
I was asked how quickly could I make my way to Houston, because they were assembling all of the expertise to formulate the response. So I booked a flight back to Houston and made my way to the BP office.
Meanwhile, over in the Gulf, uninjured crew members are told to remain on board the Damon Bankston.
BP kept us out there for like a day, under the idea that they were the command boat. And I suspect they were trying to get the story straight. Like, how were they going to present this catastrophe that was unfolding right before our eyes?
Across America, families of the Deepwater Horizon's crew are desperately awaiting news. And in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, word reaches Gordon Jones's father, Keith.
Gordon's wife, Michelle, called me to say that there was a fire on the Deepwater Horizon and that Gordon was unaccounted for, but that there was a boat coming back to shore that had 100 people on it, and that Gordon could be one of those.
My wife, she's a teacher. She was getting ready for her day, and she flicks on the TV and she sees my rig on fire. And my company was great. They called her and they told her that I was okay. I was on the Damon Bankston.
Everyone in the family who was in Baton Rouge gathered, and we sat and waited together, minute by minute, watching events unfold on television, and waiting to find out if Gordon was among those men who was on the boat coming back to shore.
The rescued crew members are due to arrive at the coastal city of Kenner. Many families have made the journey too, hoping to be reunited with their loved ones.
I could see vans and buses arriving with the survivors of the rig. They were getting off the bus, hugging family members in their work suits from the rig. And there were family members of the missing that were there as well. And what a mixed emotion it must have been for all of them. Kind of haunted me for days.
Gordon's status had gone from unaccounted to missing. They had a list of the people on the boat, and Gordon's name wasn't on it. Once we knew that Gordon wasn't on that boat, that's when all hope was lost.
You hold out all hope that there might be a survivor, but at some point you have to call off the search. We were thankful that 115 people had been saved, and we all mourned the 11 who were lost.
Gordon, he's a great guy. We were pretty tight. And he was 10 hours away from getting on the helicopter home. And there's nothing more joyous once you're on that helicopter going home. And I know he was anticipating that, and he never got a chance to.
The following morning, the Deepwater Horizon starts to tilt to one side, and its deck takes on water.
You can see the rig starting to list more and more. And eventually it listed enough where it was just too top heavy, and it fell over into the sea.
When the rig sank, now it's a major salvage operation. It's a major potential pollution operation.
That's when we realized that it was going to be a major ecological disaster.
The Deepwater Horizon has suffered a massive explosion, killing 11. The rig has sunk to the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, and in its wake, it's left behind a troubling oil slick. At BP's HQ in Houston, David Barnett has arrived to assess the damage.
When I first arrived at BP, it was chaotic. We had about a dozen people working during the day, and then about 8 or 10 people that continued during the night. So it was a 24-hour operation of planning. The rig had just sank on the 22nd. We were able to deploy ROVs, which are kind of like underwater drones with cameras and lights.
BP films the underwater operation and later releases some of its footage to the public. David's team sends the ROVs out hunting for leaks. They start with the riser pipe that connected the well to the rig.
So in this case, because the water depth was 5,000 feet, this riser was 5,000 feet long. So when the rig collapsed, it did so in such a way that this riser was laid out across the seafloor, and it was kinked right at the top. So that's where we looked first, saw no flow. So we thought maybe something happened during the rig collapse that caused the well to shut in.
The drone evidence suggests the well leak has sealed by itself. It's called a shut-in, and it's just the news Mary Landry was hoping to share with the media.
We have a visual feed into our command center. Right now, there is no crude emanating from the wellhead.
Initially, we thought that we had dodged a bullet.
As the hours pass, the oil slick on the surface continues to grow, fueling suspicions that the well is still leaking. So David's team sends in the ROVs to investigate further.
But then as they went along this riser, we eventually found a point along the riser pipe where the well was leaking.
The minute that I heard there was oil emanating from the riser, I sent an email up the chain, up the flagpole we call it, through the Atlantic Area Commander to the Commandant. And the subject line was game changer, because I knew we had a potential for a much more severe spill.
There are fears tonight that the southern coast of America could be just days away from a major ecological disaster.
1,000 barrels of oil a day have been pouring out of the broken well.
The undersea footage shows the extent of the problem. According to BP, 1,000 barrels, or 35,000 gallons of oil, is gushing into the Gulf each day. But government scientists don't agree with this estimate.
So the NOAA Scientific Support Coordinator came to me and he said, from what I'm seeing, we've definitely got a higher amount emanating than 1,000. So we went out with an unscheduled press conference that afternoon, and we basically announced that it was at least 5,000 barrels.
BP has just briefed me on a new location of an additional breach in the riser of the deep underwater well. While BP established a 1,000 barrel per day estimate of what is leaking from the well, NOAA experts believe the output can be as much as 5,000 barrels.
100 miles from the spill site, oceanographer Monty Graham notices something strange in his hometown of Mobile, Alabama.
I was going out to the front porch, and I could feel the rain feel. You could feel the rain was coming. And then there was this slight smell of diesel. And then when the rain came, it really started smelling. Then it clicked. At that moment, even though I know I'm 100 miles from it, it was pretty clear that there was oil coming out in enough volume that we could pick it up in the rain. That was the moment I thought, oh crap, this is going to be really bad for a really long period of time.
180,000 gallons of oil is now pouring into the Gulf of Mexico every day. All 5 states along the Gulf Coast are staring down the barrel of an environmental catastrophe.
The guys around here, they've been working on their boats for the last couple months, getting ready to go make the opening for the shrimp season. And we don't even know if they're going to be a shrimp season this year.
The Coast Guard is called into action again. Its job now is to contain the colossal oil spill.
Because this spill was so massive in scale, we needed the whole of government. We needed federal, state, local, and we also needed international help. This was such a big spill.
Mary Landry's team battles the slick by burning off oil at the surface and spraying chemical dispersants into the water.
You're trying to protect precious ecosystem and precious shoreline. Particularly in Louisiana, there's a lot of really, really biodiverse and rich wetland and shoreline areas that we were very concerned about protecting.
The oil dispersant is a controversial chemical called Corexit. It's toxic and is known to be a danger to the health of both humans and wildlife.
It's always a trade-off. You don't want to put anything in the water, but you've already got oil in the water. And what's the impact to marine life, and what's the impact to the biodiversity in the water column?
They were using dispersants in much higher quantities than had ever been used before. Those dispersants were not actually allowed in some other countries, including the UK. They were saying, no, it's perfectly safe, it's like dishwashing soap. And we were looking at provided information that suggested otherwise.
The ocean has become toxic. and the government is forced to shut down the Louisiana fishing industry. It's a move that brings the local economy to its knees.
What I'm gonna do about feeding my children, what I'm gonna do about feeding my family, to put them through school. We're gonna be just like the fish you see in the water, dead.
Over in Houston, David Barnett has a plan to stop the oil leak. His team has built a giant structure called a cofferdam. This will fit over the well where it rises out of the sea floor.
We had never dealt with any kind of a sustained blowout in deep water. But we were hopeful that once we got the cofferdam over the leak point, we could at least contain the oil.
Photographer Gerald Herbert travels out to the site and documents the attempt.
We got on a vessel with this containment device. They put these chains and cranes on it. They lifted it up. It was nighttime. Didn't matter. They were working 24/7. They moved this thing out there and they just slowly lower it into the water.
You had to fly this underwater robot to the bottom of the ocean to even start working on anything. The problem is on the seafloor, 5,000 feet of water, it's near freezing temperatures, and it's the absolute definition of pitch dark. So it's very much like trying to do something on the moon.
Being the only journalists out there, we're reporting back to the world these glimmers of hope. And we're sending these images and these stories back, and everyone's hanging on the edge of their seat, waiting to see if this works.
As the cofferdam lowers into the depths, the freezing conditions come into play. Buoyant ice-like crystals form under the structure and begin to push it upwards.
It made the cofferdam float back towards the surface. When we weren't able to position the cofferdam, everyone was very disappointed. By this time, everyone recognized that if we couldn't get this stopped very soon, that it was going to be probably the biggest ecological disaster that we've had in the Gulf forever.
Oil is creeping steadily towards the shore. The stakes are particularly high in Plaquemines Parish, a county surrounded on both sides by water. The task of protecting its fragile wetlands falls to local conservationist P.J. Hahn.
Early on, I got invited to go on the helicopter to fly the coast. I wanted to see what was actually happening out there. We came across large amounts of oil about probably 50 miles offshore. So if this oil hits our coast, we're in deep trouble, because looking out the helicopter, as far as you could see from horizon to horizon, was oil. I mean, the beast was moving in, and it moving in pretty good.
P.J. Hahn's evidence suggests BP could be facing an environmental disaster. But the company's chief executive, Tony Hayward, takes to the airwaves with a very different message.
Everything we can see at the moment suggests that the overall environmental impacts of this will be very, very modest.
I think it was at that moment that I realized I didn't trust these guys. I didn't trust anything that we were being told, and I wanted to break off on my own and investigate it further.
The Coast Guard, under Mary Landry's leadership, is fighting a losing battle against the oil.
The anticipation was grueling, sitting there waiting for this oil to come on shore.
Neither fire nor chemicals have slowed the slick, steady march towards shore. Mary's team turned to floating barriers called booms.
BP was ordering boom from around the world. They literally went to every manufacturer in the world for boom.
But the global supply of boom is not large enough to protect the coast of all 5 Gulf states. The governors of Alabama and Louisiana are desperate to protect their own and start a bidding war.
We call them the boom wars because every governor had to represent their state. And some of the governors insisted that they needed more boom.
It was kind of a crazy competition between local and state and across states.
The shortage means a painful choice has to be made between saving Alabama's beaches or Louisiana's wetlands.
It's so much easier to replenish a beach than it is to replenish marsh and shoreline that you'll lose forever, possibly.
We've got about 7 miles of beach here where
President Barack Obama visits the Gulf to meet with Mary and the governors to make a difficult decision.
The meeting was supposed to last 30 minutes. It ended up going 2.5 hours. So as the president was drawing the meeting to a close, he looked across at the governor of Alabama and he said, "And we will sacrifice the beaches to save the wetlands." I had to pull people out of the bed and said, "Get a truck and go over and get the boom from Alabama because the priority is Louisiana."
Meanwhile, PJ Hahn is cooking up a plan. He doesn't believe official reports about the spill and wants to know what's going on beneath the surface.
I knew something was happening out there, and it wasn't good.
He enlists the help of a diver from a family that's well known for its underwater adventures.
I have contacted Jean-Michel Cousteau, son of the famed Jacques Cousteau, and told him what I think was happening, and would he come to Louisiana and help us look at this situation and see how dangerous this could possibly be. So we went out at dark the next day, early in the morning. The sun was starting to break through. As we dove in, I will never forget, as we sunk down, it looked like an Oklahoma dust storm. Thick, thick clouds of oil traveling 40, 50 feet below the surface. There was more oil below the surface than what was above the surface. The Sargassum grass was covered in oil. The jellyfish and anything else around it covered in oil. Sharks that were swimming underneath that, chasing schools of fish that were being pushed down by the oil and feeding on that. So now you have this food chain that's developed with the sharks and the fish feeding on each other and being exposed to this corexit and the oil, and that can't be good. I can remember when I got back on the boat and I was just overwhelmed by it all. Oil boom is set on top of the water to stop the oil that's floating on top. I knew the booms weren't going to work. I knew the booms at that point were pointless. It's not going to stop the oil.
The oil is on the surface. And there's no evidence of the oil has a specific gravity that's about half that of water. Right. It's very difficult for oil to stay in the column. It wants to go to the surface. Right.
I knew that what they were saying was not true. And there was no other piece of equipment that would stop oil in the water column. Knowing the coast like I knew the coast, I thought this is the end of our coastline. I mean, there's just no way that we're going to recover from something like this.
Disaster has struck in the Gulf of Mexico. An explosion destroyed the Deepwater Horizon and has created the largest oil spill in US history. Despite enormous efforts to contain it, the slick has now reached land.
It was a very tough thing to see the coast that how you remembered, and then to see what was happening to the coast and watch it die a slow death.
PJ Hahn and journalist Gerald Herbert head out to take stock of the damage.
We were out touring the oil and taking pictures.
We came across an oil pelican that was starting to go down and die.
Hold on a second, let me get a better grip on her wing.
And he picked this bird up by the wings and he's trying to help, and it was just so graphic. It was like an anatomical representation of the horror show that was going on and killing our wildlife.
It's like, this is the defining moment of this oil spill. I knew then that people would be outraged.
The images go global. BP chairman Tony Hayward is forced to change his tune.
The defence of the shoreline at this point has not been successful, and I feel devastated by that, absolutely gutted.
Well control specialist David Barnett is headed into the Gulf to personally oversee the next attempt to seal the well. Until now, he's only seen the operation through BP's underwater cameras.
For several miles out, we started to see this collection of probably 40 vessels at the time. It looked like the Normandy invasion was going on in the Gulf of Mexico.
5,000 feet down, David's plans hinge on creating a blockage inside the leaking well. And BP live streams the operation in a public show of transparency.
The first attempt that we made was what they called the top kill, pumping high-density drilling mud and trying to overcome the flow just by momentum first, but none of that was successful.
The team switches to a technique called a junk shot,
which involved pumping a variety of solid materials, rubber, golf balls, cut-up car tires into the well. We were on live TV the entire time that we were doing this. But every time that we thought we were establishing some kind of a seal, the pressure would increase inside the wellbore itself and just expel all the material out.
After 16 attempts, David is forced to give up and return to base.
I really thought that we would find some way to seal the well much earlier than we were able to. So I didn't really expect that it would turn into the magnitude of the disaster that it eventually did.
It's devastating news for the millions watching the live stream from home.
It was like, this feeling of helplessness, this feeling that they're never going to get this fixed.
And knowing that they weren't shutting the well in just, gave no end. You had no idea when this was going to end.
The footage is a PR disaster. And worse still, it appears there's even more oil leaking from the well.
An average of 19,000 barrels of oil a day gushing from the ruptured well, 4 times more than the 5,000 BP had claimed. Total so far, 17 to 39 million gallons.
With this latest news, BP is public enemy number 1.
They've destroyed the environment, and their assets need to be seized.
BP, you suck!
High-profile celebrities shun the company.
It's a disgrace. I think most of us think it's a disgrace.
Lady Gaga, Backstreet Boys announced they were boycotting BP.
The oil spill by BP.
Talk show host Jimmy Fallon's protest song becomes an instant hit. In an attempt to regain the PR initiative, BP releases an advert apologizing for the oil spill.
To those affected and your families, I'm deeply sorry.
No one is falling for it. The BP boss is ridiculed across the media.
I'm Tony Hayward,
President and CEO of BP. We're sorry. We're sorry. We're sorry. Sorry. We're sorry. Sorry. We're sorry.
When do we want it? Now!
As the public turns against BP, the US turns against Britain.
Anti-British sentiment was palpable here after the Deepwater Horizon incident. People emphasized British Petroleum, even though the official name of the company was BP PLC at the time.
I love the British people, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for everything you've ever done. Thank you for 110 million gallons of oil. We can use that. Thank you so much. We needed that.
In the US, BP is cast as yet another bad guy Brit, but in reality, it's almost as American as it is British. In 1998, British Petroleum merged with Amoco to become Beyond Petroleum.
The transaction itself will be the largest industrial merger ever.
This Anglo-American giant became the third biggest oil producer in the world. But it also had one of the worst safety records in the industry.
Workers at BP's Texas City oil refinery overfilled a container with volatile chemicals. They ignited. 15 were killed.
BP was known for kind of poo-pooing the need for safety. There were parties where industry and regulators would have fun together, described as a too cozy relationship. Therefore, the industry was not under as much pressure from the government to install clear safety management.
Many believe the US government could have done more to prevent disasters like the Deepwater Horizon. But in 2010, there's only one villain in the eyes of the American people. And even the president can't resist putting in the boot.
We will make BP pay for the damage their company has caused. Tonight, we pray for the people of the Gulf. And we pray that a hand may guide us through the storm towards a brighter day. Already, this oil spill is the worst environmental disaster America has ever faced.
It's 2 months since tragedy struck the Deepwater Horizon, leaving 11 dead. And America's worst ever oil spill is still growing unchecked. In Washington, hearings into the cause of the disaster have already started.
I was involved with a lot of the hearings. I remember BP had this defense. They opened up with something like, isn't it true that the drilling crew is in charge of keeping the well under control? It's a loaded question. All the decisions that led to that moment, they put those men in that position. That was not their doing. It seemed like the process was trying to blame as many individuals as possible, instead of seeing this as maybe a systemic problem.
As the hearings unfold, the time comes for Tony Hayward to give evidence, and fisherwoman Diane Wilson decides to act.
The Gulf of Mexico was being ruined, and that the man who was primarily responsible was giving testimony. So I got a big tube of black paint, oily paint. I went down to the Capitol, and when he started testifying, that's when I stood up and I got that paint and I put it all over myself, and I said, this is what it looks like in the marshes of the Gulf of Mexico.
You need to go to jail.
I said, Tony, you need to be in jail. You need to be in jail. And then I think I pulled out my handcuffs and I said, I'm going to arrest you. I think I said, I'm going to arrest you. And that's when all pandemonium broke out. And then they took me to jail. I really felt like I was speaking as a fisherwoman. And I always said, I'm a fisherwoman. I am from the Gulf.
While BP is in the dock, over in the Gulf, its cameras are about to broadcast David Barnett's latest effort to plug the leaking well. His team has cobbled together equipment from the previous failed attempts and created a new piece of kit.
What we call a capping stack was designed, fabricated, and tested. It was designed to create a pressure seal on the top of the well. It had never been done before.
As the capping stack reaches the sea floor, David's team enters the crucial phase of the operation. Here, they must position the device directly over the top of the leak.
It actually shut in right where we had calculated it should. We could then shut the adjustable valves and completely stop the flow.
On the 15th of July, 86 days after the Deepwater Horizon exploded, the well is finally capped.
Well, the entire industry kind of sighed a collective sigh of relief. Everyone watching on the live stream around the world, you could just feel a kind of a sense of accomplishment.
When I heard that the well was finally capped, I was elated, but we didn't believe it at first. Even though we heard it, it was a relief, and we wanted to believe that they were telling us the truth. That was probably the only time they did tell the truth.
It's estimated that 134 million gallons of oil spilled into the Gulf of Mexico. And scientists predict it will take the Louisiana wetlands 50 years to completely recover.
There was moments when I really thought it was going to kill the Gulf, and that was unthinkable. That was like dying.
Tens of thousands of people join the fight against the oil slick, and together begin the mammoth task of cleaning up the coast.
One of the things that you take away from this is how resilient the people were and how hard everybody worked.
Excuse me, Mr. Hayward, could I ask you just to pull that up? Some of the members are having trouble hearing.
It takes many years for BP and its partners in the Deepwater Horizon to face judgment. By the disaster's 10th anniversary in 2020, it cost the four companies around $71 billion, most of which has fallen on BP. BP has since been widely reported reiterating its commitment to the Gulf and to restoring the region's economy and environment. But the human cost of the Deepwater Horizon disaster remains to this day.
I know that Keith Jones, Gordon Jones's father, was distraught and very upset about the lack of accountability for the death of his son.
BP pled guilty to 11 counts of manslaughter. Their PR department has done a great job of limiting the public's knowledge of that, but they did it. I was there when they did it.
Despite the criminal charges against the company, no BP executives were held responsible.
So there was absolutely no individual held accountable for the loss of life of these 11 lives.
BP made many consecutive decisions that saved them money but made a blowout more likely. If BP had made one of those decisions the other way for the right reasons, Gordon would be alive today.
I haven't found peace, and I don't think it'd be right of me to find peace. You know, like, every time I find joy with my wife, my daughters do something wonderful, and they're always wonderful, and I feel joy for them. I know that joy is 11 times lost.
About 4 weeks after we lost Gordon, Michelle, his wife, went into labor and gave birth to their second son, Max. Little Max looks just like his dad, still does. This was a gift, a little gift given Gordon back to us. And you know, I wouldn't have it any other way.